In today's Locked On Pelicans, I'll tell you what the one thing New Orleans can't do is think the Memphis Grizzlies are a blueprint to follow, which means a trade has to happen, and I have two deals for Brandon Ingram. It's the Tuesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Tuesday, we're going to be talking some trades in today's episode, but more importantly than that, something New Orleans cannot do, and that is think they can follow a Memphis Grizzlies blueprint, and I'll explain why. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Don't forget about the daily Locked On Pelicans newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, get this one, is brought to you by the College Football Playoffs. The College Football Playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff, presented by Allstate, begins with 4 first-round games, December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. So let's get into following the Memphis Grizzlies and a potential blueprint there, because on the surface, you see some similarities, but these are really only on the surface, and I'll explain why. The Memphis Grizzlies went from being a good team, 51 and 31 in the 2022-2023 season, to falling to 27 and 55 the next year. They had a 1 year real bad year. They drafted Zach Edey with the 9th overall pick, and then they bumped back up this year to 18 and 19, and they're second place in the Western Conference. So you're good. Then injuries and suspensions, let's call it, derail your season. You finish bad, you get a good draft pick, then you vault right back into contention here. Sounds similar to New Orleans a little bit, right? 49 wins just a season ago. Injuries have completely, and look, there's a lot of things that are going wrong with New Orleans, but first and foremost, the ones are injuries, right? Like, it's more than anything else. The reason for a lot of the problems are injuries, even if I think these issues are actually deeper with this team. But injuries are first and foremost what's causing just a lost season at this point in time. And so Memphis went through them. New Orleans is going through it now. Next year, they're healthy. They should be good again, right? Like, you get a high draft pick, an impactful player there, or a future guy on a rookie deal. It's maybe the best thing that could happen to you, and you roll from there. But that's kind of where the similarities end, and I don't think it's as similar as you might think. Yeah, on the surface, lost season, you'll be good next year. You know, the Dallas Mavericks kind of went through this a couple of years ago, right? They tanked to avoid getting into the playoffs, drafted Derek Lively II, then bounced back last year to go and make the NBA Finals behind him being a difference maker, right? All of that, New Orleans should follow the plan. No. When you look at Memphis in particular here, the year that before they got hurt, they were the second seed at 51 and 31, which tells you what the West was like 2 years ago compared to last year. This year they're the second seed again. They just have more of a track record for it. And in fact, before the injury-plagued 23-24 season, so if you go back to 21-22, then 22-23, the 2021-2022 season, Memphis was the second seed. The year after that, at 22 and 23, Memphis was the second seed. Then they had the injury-plagued year. Now they're the second seed again. Look, it just always being the second seed is kind of funny in this conversation, but overall, they had a better track record than New Orleans did to believe that they could just bounce back like they have this season. There's no reason to fully believe that New Orleans is going to go from where they are right now to being like a world beater next year. One of the things that they had said this past offseason was like, we've seen it enough. It wasn't good enough. We need to make some changes. Their change was bringing in DeJounte Murray, and that can still be a very good move here. But let's not pretend like they were the second seed or, a third seed and just one guy away. They've been a play-in tournament team the past number of years, including when people were still relatively healthy. They were relatively healthy last year, and they were still not fighting for a top 6 seed. They kind of were till the very end. I don't think this is a plan that they can follow. I think if you delude yourself into thinking, this season's lost only because of injuries, we'll get a good draft pick, then we'll just be exactly where we're supposed to be. It was going to be an uphill battle to get to 49 wins again this year, particularly because the West is really good and they just haven't had the track record. We've seen some questions about the fit between Zion and Ingram, and those guys are back again, even with the addition of DeJounte Murray, right? There's no reason to think that this team, if they just add an impactful rookie and keep everyone kind of the same, say you keep Ingram, Zion, trade CJ away, add an impactful rookie, that things will be dramatically different because the core of the team is not the group that Memphis has. Look, we're not going to debate if they should have taken John Morant first or not. The first choice was always going to be Zion. Every team would have done that. And even I just don't see how you can kind of kill him on that decision. But there isn't a Jaren Jackson Jr. There isn't a Desmond Bane. Those guys are all relatively healthy. Jaren Jackson Jr. has had one season when he hasn't been fully healthy, and that was his third in the league. He played 66 games last year, 63 the year before that, 78 in that season where they were also the second seed. He plays games. Desmond Bane was banged up last year and was a big part of why they lost. But the 2 years before that, 58 games, and then before that, 76 in those second seed seasons. These guys are playing. You just haven't seen that from Zion, from Ingram in particular, both of those guys in particular, to think that things would change next year. So when I hear people being like, well, look at what happened to Memphis, New Orleans can do that same turnaround, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's even remotely kind of in the same kind of conversation here for New Orleans. They need to make deeper, bigger changes here, and they're going to at least be forced to do that because of the salary cap situation they're in, which is going to lead to the next two topics of the show, which are trades for Brandon Ingram. You could also make it CJ, but I don't think the same thing would happen in either of those two deals. So we're going to go with Ingram. You got to get under the salary cap. You could do that with a minimum move or something like that, but do something bigger that sets you up for better success. It goes back to what I talked about in the show yesterday for the Everydayers. Everything that's done this season needs to be setting the franchise up for future, long-term, use David Griffin's word, sustainable success, which is what we all want to see here anyway. So that's what they need to be doing. And I've got two deals that kind of do it in different directions. So I want to look at Houston trading for Brandon Ingram, what a trade would look like and why New Orleans would do this. Then after that, we're going to look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. That trade package is very different, and I think these kind of highlight different ways New Orleans can try and approach the future, and I think it's important to look at. So that's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So get ready to take on all the NFL and NBA action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and NBA all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, those lines are always updating. You know it's going to go a certain way. Get in on the app, find that new line, bet on it with just $5, and you're going to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. You can also check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you can do that by just visiting FanDuel.com and joining today. And you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. We're the #1 podcast for a reason here. And please subscribe to the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter over at LockedOnDaily.com. All right, let's get into the trade talk. I've got two teams, Oklahoma City and Houston. I want to look at Houston first. We're going to look at least two more teams this week, and there's one in particular that I might have teased at some point, even in this show, actually, that you could read too much into that. Whatever. There's one team that I really want to look at that has my probable number one trade target. It's not who you're thinking, and I'll tell you coming up in a future show. See if you can guess it in the comments down below. Okay, so let's look at the Houston Rockets and what a trade would look like here. And I have a deal that might require a third team being involved, but you can those are all like small details here. And this is Brandon Ingram getting traded to the Houston Rockets. It's Brandon Ingram and Daniel Tice going to the Houston Rockets for Steven Adams, Jeff Green, Jayshawn Tate, and Aaron Holiday. I don't even think you necessarily need to throw a pick in here, even though one would be nice, even if it's a protected pick in some capacity. So none of those players are particularly sexy, right? Jeff Green is how old at this point? Steven Adams already been here, and that's not what we're looking for a redo of, even if he's kind of a fun guy. Jayshawn Tate isn't anything all that special, in my opinion. And Aaron Holiday feels like he could be out of the league at any point in time. So why do I think this is a good deal for New Orleans? Well, it's all about the salary cap relief, in my opinion here. And that's what New Orleans is maybe looking to do, right? Jayshawn Tate this year is averaging, let me pull up the stats for all of these guys because I don't believe they're particularly good here. Jayshawn Tate is averaging 2.4 points per game. Jeff Green is averaging 2.4 points per game. Steven Adams is kind of funny to me. He's averaging 2.7 points per game. And Aaron Holiday, the high scorer of the bunch here at 4 points per game. We're trading Brandon Ingram for three guys that are scoring under 3 points per game and one guy that's scoring 4. That is not great. That is a combined like under 12 points per game, something like that here. It's all about the salary cap relief. So when you look at this, not only does it save New Orleans money this year, this saves them about $5.3 million. So it gets them under the luxury tax without having to just dump a guy like Jordan Hawkins. That's somewhat valuable in my opinion, or dumping Jose Alvarado. So you have salary cap relief with getting rid of a guy you were looking to get rid of anyway. Steven Adams is an expiring deal. Jeff Green is an expiring deal. Jayshawn Tate is an expiring deal. The only guy that is going to be remaining on your roster after this move is Aaron Holiday, who I believe, let me pull it up. Is there a player, a team option on him, I think. Yeah, it's a team option for next season. So in theory, all of that salary completely comes off the books. Now, we've looked at this. Well, you could just let Brandon Ingram walk if that's going to be the case, right? You could. That's why you only do this if you can probably get a pick. And the other reason is it just saves you money this year. And even just to dump, a minimum deal or something like that to duck under the tax, you'd have to use an asset. You don't need to do that here. You would ideally like to get one of their young guys. I don't think you're going to truly get that here. Jabari Smith Jr. would be great, but I don't think that's the guy that you're really going to get. This is just about clearing the books here. And then it allows you, again, to follow through on trading CJ McCollum as well, and you really clear salary for next season. If they get rid of Ingram's contract and just get a bunch of expiring deals, and Ingram's himself is expiring, so you don't need to do this, right? That's where some of this maybe falls apart a little bit. You could just let Ingram walk, play it out, and who cares? And maybe try and trade him in a sign and trade where you get something back. But it's about keeping the books pretty clean here. All these guys coming off, but all of these then could get spun off in another deal this season. If you pulled the trigger on this, say tomorrow, you could do this and then trade Steven Adams, could trade Jeff Green, could trade Jayshawn Tate, and move whoever it is you need to move for another piece that you'd like. So this deal lets you get to another point in time, provided you've got time before the trade deadline to do it. And I do think Houston could use a bit of a scoring upgrade. They're one of the better younger teams in the league and are a little bit surprising, third in the Western Conference right now. But if they feel like there's blood in the water and we can really go for it and maybe get to a conference finals or the NBA finals, Brandon Ingram's certainly the guy that would kind of help you do that and could be an upgrade over one or two other guys on the team, even if they're not going to be included in this deal. And at that point, they've just gotten rid of bad salary they'd get rid of anyway. This is kind of a win-win for them. New Orleans might not want to do this because it makes a rival team better when you don't necessarily need to make him better. Again, you could just let Brandon Ingram walk, but I think the plan would then be to trade Steven Adams at $12.6 million, maybe for someone like Robert Williams III over in Portland, and therefore now you bring in kind of your backup big man that you want to have in the future with Yves Missi maybe entrenched as the starter. Maybe you move Jeff Green at $8 million, and New Orleans doesn't really have anyone like that for another $8 or $9 million player that you think is better. And all of a sudden now, this leads to so much more maneuvering this specific season. And that's why you do something like this. And I think Houston could maybe feel like, hey, if Ingram gets back healthy, like we'll be good. We could really make a run in the postseason with him as, your fourth option, which is, I think, one of those things that we're kind of coming around on and feeling like that's what he's better suited for than being first or second, like he's been kind of forced to here in New Orleans. So I can see that for them, there's zero downside to doing this other than they need to sign 2 more players. So it's slightly more expensive. They're adding $5.3 million in this deal. You'd need to add at least another 4 or so. New Orleans would have to eat one of these players probably and just kind of, waive them or something like that. So they're just wasting money. But you could also probably get Houston to kick in, the cash allotment. I don't know if they have it or not. As I yawn here. Oh. It's later when I'm recording this one. So, if they have some cash too, that kind of helps with the financial situation as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons why both New Orleans and Houston would look at this kind of trade when it comes down to the financials. There's just so little risk. If Brandon Ingram walks, these guys were going to be off your roster if you're Houston anyway, provided you didn't trade them. So let Ingram walk, and who cares? And maybe he's kind of forced to sign like a team-friendly deal because no market seems to exist for him. And there's some other teams, I think, that would be interested in him. So we'll look at those a little bit later in the week. I'll tell you, I kind of teased at the beginning of this, but Memphis might be my favorite trade target for a very specific player on their roster that I think would do wonders, especially if you're going to keep building around Zion Williamson. See if you can guess. That opens it up. There's only so many guys on their roster that makes sense with that. I bet you can probably start to guess it now. But if New Orleans is trying to keep the salary cap clean, and other deals might not do this, right? So this allows you to try and do something else. But this next deal that we'll talk about with the Oklahoma City Thunder, none of those guys are on short-term deals, really, including one that maybe could potentially need a bigger contract in the future. So if you're really about we are prioritizing the cap sheet, we are going to keep it as clean as possible, I do think this is maybe one of the better deals out there for the New Orleans Pelicans, even if it just feels like you're not really doing much. But sometimes that can maybe be the best thing for the team. So that's something that's worth keeping in mind. Do you hate it? Look, I don't love it. I get the logic behind it, but I don't particularly love it. If you could just get a pick, would you do it? Look, it's better than letting Brandon Ingram walk for nothing, getting even a protected first-round pick, and maybe that's what you need in a trade like this. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. So coming up next, let's look at a deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder that actually kind of goes a different direction with this for New Orleans. And I'll explain what that is coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. And now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth, and these generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For specific product disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for? twice, maybe. That definitely happened to me. I actually had one subscription that I didn't even realize I still had on my bank account, and Rocket Money made it really easy to track it down. It's basically like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It's going to help you monitor your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Look, getting yourself in a good financial shape, that should be your number one New Year's resolution going into this year. And one app that lets me see everything all in one place is like the biggest thing. If I have to go to multiple places, I'm not going to do it. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Now, what's the plan for Spencer Rattler the rest of the season? Ross Jackson, who I'm going to see today, of Locked On Saints is covering it all. So go check out the Locked On Saints podcast for everything black and gold, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Houston Rockets trade is not sexy. It makes sense. I could see why they would do that. Look, if you could turn one of those expiring contracts into a better fit long-term piece that would be in your rotation, good. Because this team, that trade alone doesn't give you like the flexibility to completely remake yourself. It's just figuring something to do with Brandon Ingram that can maybe help a little bit. Maybe if you could do CJ2 for a similar thing, that wouldn't be a bad idea, but who knows? So for New Orleans, though, they want to compete next year, right? Like they want to compete next year. So you're going to need maybe better talent on the roster, something along those lines. I've got a trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder that I do think makes... This one's a stretch on the OKC side, right? Does OKC need to trade for Brandon Ingram? And in this scenario, does Ingram come off the bench? I think there's a very realistic chance that could maybe be the case, or at least anchor those bench units. So Brandon Ingram traded to the Thunder, and the Pelicans get Lou Dort, Aaron Wiggins, and Ousmane Dieng. Look, we don't love Dort. I don't love Dort either, but he's a useful player, and that's someone that has started all 25 games for him this year. Like he's out there doing work at 10 points per game. He's shooting the 3 ball. Wow, him and Herb Jones in the backcourt would be unbelievably fun, even if he's a very annoying player to go against that we don't really like because of the injury to Brandon Ingram currently. You have Aaron Wiggins, too, who's just kind of salary filler, but look, a guard off the bench that shoots the 3 at a near 40% rate. I think that's a very useful player to have for this team. And then you have Dieng, who's former lottery pick, first round pick, who young, big, I don't know, we'll see what he turns into, 3.5 points per game, but it's taking a flyer on the guy and making the money work. Now, because of when Wiggins' contract and everything, you can't do this until January 15th, so we've got to wait a little bit longer. But I think you try and kind of pull the trigger on that sort of deal for everything. He's gone not a bad contract going forward. You know, when you look at all of these guys, they are. Wiggins is making on a descending deal going forward. I think that's a pretty good scenario for the team to be in. 10.5 this year, 9.6, 8.8, 8 the final couple years there of this descending extension that he signed with that team. You know, Lou Dort is on a very team-friendly deal that he signed as well. He's in a good position. He's got 3 more years when it comes to it. And then Dieng is going to be on a rookie scale for 1 more year. And then you can figure out what to do with him later if that's what you want to do. Lou Dort's contract, by the way, let me pull that up here. 16.5 this year, 17.7, then 17.7, which is a team option. Like that's a great contract for that kind of guy. All these players could be flipped in the future. You know, particularly Lou Dort, I think. Dort is shooting well and playing good defense. You know, fits alongside Zion. So does Wiggins there too. And I think that's kind of an important thing. You can really remake your team with Dort, Murray and Herb as like a defensive monstrosity, like in a very good way that just shuts teams down, I think. And that would be a lot of fun to be able to watch. And OKC gets another elite score to just, I don't know, they have a luxury of riches. Do something with it, right? There's no reason not to if it's going to improve your team. I don't know if they're going to view it that way. I think they are really happy with these role players built around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now for them, and Jay Will as their other guy. So, you want those role players on good contracts. So I could see OKC not being interested at all to this sort of trade. But I like it for New Orleans. As much as we said salary cap relief, if you kind of keep CJ, run it, this whole team back next year, but add Lou Dort and Wiggins into your rotation, Wiggins, I think, is above a guy like Hawkins. I think Lou Dort means you don't need, like a Javonte Green kind of guy who's struggled, I think, at times this year. So it kind of helps you get a lot of those pieces that you really like, but doing better, and then gives you flexibility to move someone like Hawkins, should you want. Not that you should, and I'm certainly not advocating for that, but it opens the door to those kind of possibilities, and it's going to make you more competitive next season. The Houston trade makes sense, particularly if you then move CJ in a separate deal and really clean the books and can kind of do whatever you want at that point in time with this roster and remake it in bigger ways. The OKC deal adds maybe a lot of the depth that New Orleans is missing and has been missing, throughout this season, partially due to injuries. But look, we know losing Najee Marshall was going to hurt this roster, as some of the other deals have done as well. Losing Larry Nance Jr., losing, Dyson, even at Dyson's level last year and not the level that he's at this season. So which of these two do you like? Do you like the OKC trade and what it leads to? Do you like the Houston deal and kind of like what it could lead to? Or are you prioritizing your cap or not? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Because look, by adding these guys on other long-term deals, New Orleans still is in not a great cap situation next year, and is still going to need to deduct the tax again, even if you trade out Brandon Ingram's salary. That's worth keeping in mind because Trey's extension kicks in next season, which adds a ton of money onto the books. Let me know, Houston or Oklahoma City in these two hypothetical trades. We'll get more later in the week here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and we'll be back tomorrow to talk more trades and all of that with this team.